Looking for the scariest stories from around the world? Look no further than Mr. Horror. Get ready to be spooked out of your mind with today 3 true ghost horror stories that will ruin your sleep. Let's begin. It was a dark and stormy night, and I was home alone. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me to entertain myself. I was sitting on the couch, watching TV, when I heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then the noise grew louder and more persistent. It sounded like someone was walking around in my bedroom. My heart began to race, and my palms started to sweat. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the sound was too real, too present. Suddenly, I heard a voice. It was faint at first, but it grew louder and clearer. It was a woman's voice, and she was calling out my name. I was frozen with fear, too scared to move, but the voice kept calling out to me, and eventually I mustered up the courage to go upstairs and investigate. As I climbed the stairs, the voice grew louder and more urgent. It was like the woman was in distress, and she needed my help. When I reached my bedroom, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of my room, her face twisted in agony. She was wearing a white dress, and her hair was long and dark. I tried to speak to her, to ask her what was wrong, but she didn't respond. Instead, she started to walk towards me, her eyes fixed on mine. I was too scared to move, and before I knew it, she was standing right in front of me. I could feel her breath on my face, and it was ice cold. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. I was left alone in my bedroom, trembling and sobbing. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept hearing the woman's voice in my head, and I knew that I would never forget what had happened. I felt like I had been visited by a ghost, and I was terrified of what might happen next. The next morning, I tried to tell my parents what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said that I was just imagining things, that it was all in my head. But I knew that what I had experienced was real. I could still feel the woman's breath on my face, and I could still hear her voice calling out my name. I started to research the history of our house, and that's when I discovered something shocking. A woman had died in my bedroom years ago, and her spirit was said to haunt the house. I was stunned. It seemed like my experience was not just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it was terrifying. After the encounter with the ghost in my bedroom, I became obsessed with finding out more about her. I spent countless hours researching the history of the house and the woman who had died there. I learned that her name was Anna, and she had died in the early 1900 seconds. She had been a young woman when she died, and her death was sudden and unexpected. As I delved deeper into her story, I started to feel a strange connection to her. It was like I could feel her presence around me, like she was trying to communicate with me in some way. I started to experience strange things around the house. Doors would open and close on their own, objects would move by themselves, and I would hear strange noises in the dead of night. At first, I was scared, but then I started to realize that Anna wasn't trying to harm me. She was just trying to communicate with me, to let me know that she was still here. I started to talk to her, to ask her questions and listen for her responses. It was like having a conversation with a friend, except my friend was a ghost. As the weeks went by, my relationship with Anna grew stronger. I started to feel like she was a part of my life, like she was watching over me. But then, something strange started to happen. I started to feel like Anna was trying to tell me something, like she had a message for me. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it in my bones. It was like she was trying to warn me of something important. One night, I woke up to find Anna standing at the foot of my bed. She looked sad and scared, and her eyes were pleading with me. I knew then that something was wrong. Anna was trying to tell me something urgent. But before I could ask her what it was, she vanished. I was left alone in my bedroom, feeling more scared and alone than ever before. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, trying to figure out what Anna was trying to tell me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't decipher her message. The next day, I decided to seek out a medium, someone who could help me communicate with Anna more clearly. I found someone online and made an appointment for that evening. When I arrived at the medium's house, I was nervous and scared. I didn't know what to expect, but I was hopeful that the medium could help me. And then, something strange happened. As soon as I walked into the medium's house, I could feel Anna's presence around me. It was like she was there, watching over me. The medium led me into a back room where we sat down and began the session. I told her everything that had happened, and she listened intently. And then she did something that I will never forget. She closed her eyes and began to speak in a strange language. It was like she was channeling someone, like she was speaking for Anna. And then she spoke the words that would change everything. Together, we must find the truth. The medium's words echoed in my mind. Together, we must find the truth. But what did they mean? What truth was Anna trying to reveal to me? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Over the next few weeks, I started to experience strange things around the house again. Objects would move by themselves, and I would hear strange noises in the dead of night. And then, one night, I had a dream. I was walking through the woods, and I could feel Anna's presence beside me. We walked for what felt like hours, until we came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a gravestone. It was old and weathered, and I could barely make out the words on it. But as I got closer, I could see that it was Anna's grave. I woke up in a cold sweat, knowing that I had to find Anna's grave. I had to uncover the truth. The next day, I went to the local library and started searching through old records. I spent hours poring over maps and documents, trying to find any clues that could lead me to Anna's grave. And then, finally, I found it. It was in an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, hidden behind a row of trees. I drove there as fast as I could, my heart pounding with anticipation. When I arrived at the cemetery, I felt a strange sense of dread. It was like something was trying to stop me from uncovering the truth. But I didn't let that stop me. I made my way through the cemetery, searching for Anna's grave. And then, finally, I found it. It was an old, weathered stone, just like in my dream. I knelt down beside it, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. And then I heard Anna's voice. It was soft and gentle, but it was filled with sorrow. "Thank you for finding me," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to uncover the truth." And then everything fell into place. I realized that Anna had been murdered, that her death had been covered up by the people in power. Together, Anna and I uncovered the truth. We found evidence that implicated several powerful people in the community, people who had wanted Anna dead. With the truth finally revealed, Anna was able to move on. She thanked me for helping her, and then she vanished into the ether. But her spirit will always be with me. I know that Anna is watching over me, protecting me from harm. And so, I urge you to listen to the whispers in the night. You never know who or what might be trying to communicate with you. And sometimes, the truth can only be found in the darkness. It was a cold winter night, and I was alone in my old, creaky house. I had just finished watching a horror movie and was feeling uneasy, but I tried to brush it off and head to bed. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the window. I tried to ignore it and put it down to the wind outside, but then the tapping grew louder. I opened my eyes and sat up, listening intently. The tapping had stopped, but I could hear something else. It sounded like whispers, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I tried to convince myself that I was just hearing things, but then I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It was a shadowy figure, standing just outside my window. I was frozen with fear, too scared to move, but then the figure started tapping on the window again, and I knew I had to investigate. As I approached the window, I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I slowly pulled back the curtain, and that's when I saw her. It was a young girl, no older than 10 or 11, with long, dark hair and a white dress. She was staring directly at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. I tried to speak to her, to ask her who she was and what she wanted, but she didn't respond. Instead, she started tapping on the window again, more urgently this time. I was scared, but I couldn't look away. I felt like she was trying to tell me something, like she had a message for me. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished into thin air. I was left alone in my bedroom, trembling with fear. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew that I would never forget it. Over the next few weeks, I started to experience strange things around the house. Objects would move by themselves, and I would hear whispers in the dead of night. And then, one night, I had a dream. I was walking through the woods, and I could feel the girl's presence beside me. We walked for what felt like hours, until we came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old, abandoned house. The girl led me inside, and as we walked through the halls, I could feel a sense of unease growing inside me. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a newspaper article, dated from the 1920s, with a picture of the girl and a headline that read, "Local Girl Goes Missing." I woke up in a cold sweat, knowing that I had to uncover the truth about the girl's disappearance. The next day, I started to research the girl's disappearance. I spent hours poring over old newspaper articles and police reports, trying to piece together what had happened to her. I learned that the girl's name was Emily, and she had disappeared in the 1920s. She had been playing outside her house one day, and then she was gone. The police had searched for her for weeks, but they had never found any trace of her. Her family had been devastated, and they had never recovered from her disappearance. As I continued my research, I started to experience strange things around the house again. Objects would move by themselves, and I would hear whispers in the dead of night. And then, one night, I saw Emily again. She was standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes fixed on mine. I could feel her presence around me, like she was trying to tell me something. I knew that I had to help her, to uncover the truth about her disappearance. The next day, I went to the local library and started searching through old records. I spent hours poring over maps and documents, trying to find any clues that could lead me to Emily's location. And then, finally, I found something. It was a diary entry written by Emily's mother detailing a secret room in the old abandoned house in the woods. I knew then that I had to find that room, that it was the key to uncovering the truth about Emily's disappearance. I drove to the old abandoned house, feeling a sense of unease growing inside me. As I walked through the halls, I could feel Emily's presence beside me. And then I found it, the secret room, hidden behind a bookshelf. I pushed the bookshelf aside, and there it was. The room was small and dark, with only a few old toys scattered on the floor. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a small trapdoor in the floor, and it was slightly ajar. I opened the trapdoor, and that's when I saw her. Emily's body was lying in the small, cramped space, her eyes closed and her face peaceful. I was shocked and horrified. I couldn't believe that someone had done this to her, that she had been hidden away in this secret room for decades. But then I felt a strange sense of peace. It was like Emily was finally able to rest, like she was able to move on to the afterlife. As I walked out of the old abandoned house, I knew that I had done something important. I had uncovered the truth about Emily's disappearance, and I had given her the closure that she needed. And then, as I was walking back to my car, I heard her voice one last time. "Thank you," she said. "I can finally rest." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing that I had helped Emily find the peace that she deserved. I knew that I would never forget this experience, and that it would stay with me for the rest of my life. After Emily's body was discovered, the police reopened the case and launched an investigation into her disappearance. They were able to track down a suspect, a neighbor who had been living near Emily's family at the time of her disappearance. The neighbor was an elderly man who had since passed away, but the police were able to uncover evidence that linked him to Emily's abduction and murder. It was a bittersweet victory, but at least Emily's family could finally have closure. They were grateful to me for uncovering the truth and giving them the answers that they had been searching for all these years. But even though the case was solved, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's spirit was still with me. I would see her in my dreams, and sometimes I could feel her presence around me, like she was trying to communicate with me. I started to feel like she was trying to tell me something, like she had a message for me, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And then, one night, I had a dream. I was walking through the woods again, and I could feel Emily's presence beside me. And then she stopped and turned to me. Her eyes were full of sadness, but also a strange sense of urgency. "There are others," she said, "others like me. They need your help." And then she vanished, leaving me alone in the woods. I knew then that I had to help these other spirits. I didn't know how or where to start, but I knew that I had to try. Over the next few weeks, I started to research other missing persons cases, trying to find any clues that could lead me to the spirits that Emily had mentioned. And then, finally, I found something. It was a newspaper article about a young boy who had disappeared in the 1950s under suspicious circumstances. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, knowing that this could be the beginning of a new journey. But I knew that I couldn't ignore it. I had to help these spirits find the closure that they deserved. And so, I urge you to listen to the whispers in the night. You never know who or what might be trying to communicate with you, and sometimes the truth can only be found in the darkness. The end of Emily's story was just the beginning of a new journey, a journey to help the spirits that were still searching for their own closure. And I knew that I was ready to take that journey, no matter where it might lead me. It was a dark and stormy night, and I was driving home from a friend's house. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind was howling through the trees. As I turned onto a quiet back road, I saw something in the distance. It was a figure standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down, trying to get a better look. As I got closer, I could see that it was a woman wearing an old-fashioned dress and holding an umbrella. I rolled down my window and called out to her, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me with cold, empty eyes. I started to feel uneasy, like something was off about this woman. But then she started to walk towards my car. I hit the gas, trying to get away from her, but she just kept following me. I could hear her footsteps on the pavement, getting closer and closer. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished into thin air. I was left alone on the dark, rainy road, my heart racing in my chest. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew that I would never forget it. Over the next few weeks, I started to experience strange things around my house. Objects would move by themselves, and I would hear strange noises in the dead of night. And then, one night, I had a dream. I was walking through a dark forest, and I could feel the woman's presence beside me. We walked for what felt like hours, until we came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old, abandoned mansion. The woman led me inside, and as we walked through the halls, I could feel a sense of unease growing inside me. And then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a portrait of the woman, hanging on the wall. Underneath the portrait was a plaque with her name, Elizabeth. I woke up in a cold sweat, knowing that I had to uncover the truth about Elizabeth. Who was she, and why was she haunting me? I spent the next few days researching the history of the mansion that I had seen in my dream. I found out that it had been built in the late 1800 seconds by a wealthy businessman named Edward. Edward had a wife named Elizabeth, and they lived in the mansion for many years. But then, one day, Elizabeth disappeared without a trace. Edward was devastated by her disappearance, and he spent the rest of his life searching for her. He hired private investigators and offered a large reward for anyone who could find her, but no one ever did. As I delved deeper into the history of the mansion, I started to experience more strange things. I would hear footsteps in the halls, and sometimes I could feel a cold breeze blowing through the house. And then, one night, I saw her again. Elizabeth was standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes fixed on mine. I could feel her presence around me, like she was trying to communicate with me. I tried to speak to her, to ask her what she wanted, but she didn't respond. And then, just like before, she vanished into thin air. I knew that I had to find out more about Elizabeth's disappearance. I had to help her find the closure that she deserved. I decided to go to the mansion and investigate. It was abandoned now, and the windows were boarded up, but I was determined to find a way inside. As I was walking around the back of the mansion, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a set of footprints in the mud leading up to a hidden door in the side of the building. I pushed the door open, and that's when I saw it, a secret room. The room was small and dark, with only a few old toys scattered on the floor. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a photograph of Elizabeth, taken just days before her disappearance. I knew then that I had to find out what had happened to her, and as I continued my search, I found a hidden staircase leading down to a basement. The basement was dark and damp, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a small, cramped space in the corner, and it was filled with old boxes and trinkets. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a small diary with the name Elizabeth written on the cover. I opened the diary and started to read. It was filled with entries from Elizabeth, detailing her life with Edward and their growing sense of unease in the mansion. And then I found the entry that changed everything. It was written on the day of her disappearance, and it detailed a fight that she had with Edward. Edward had been drinking, and he had become violent. Elizabeth had threatened to leave him, and he had lashed out, hitting her and knocking her unconscious. And then he had hidden her away in the secret room where she had remained for years until she had died of starvation. I was horrified by what I had read, but I knew that I had to bring the truth to light. I had to help Elizabeth find the closure that she deserved. I went to the police and showed them the diary in the hidden room. They launched an investigation into Edward's involvement in Elizabeth's disappearance, and eventually they found enough evidence to charge him with her murder. Edward was sentenced to life in prison, but it was little comfort to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth's spirit was still with me, still trying to communicate with me. And then, one night, I had another dream. I was walking through the mansion again, and I could feel Elizabeth's presence beside me. We walked through the halls, and then she led me to a small, hidden room that I had never seen before. Inside the room was a small, wooden box. Elizabeth opened the box, and inside was a key. She handed me the key and then vanished. I woke up, feeling a sense of urgency. I knew that I had to find the lock that the key belonged to, that it was the key to unlocking the final piece of the puzzle. I went back to the mansion, and I searched through every room, trying to find the lock. And then, finally, I found it. It was a small, ornate lock on the front door of the mansion. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it, and then I heard a click. The lock opened. I pushed open the door, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Elizabeth's body was lying on the ground, her eyes closed and her face peaceful. I knew then that she had finally found the closure that she deserved. She had led me to the key, to the lock, and to her final resting place. As I walked out of the mansion, I knew that I would never forget Elizabeth's story. It was a haunting tale of love and betrayal, of darkness and light. But even though the case was closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Elizabeth's spirit was still with me. I knew that I would always carry a piece of her with me, and that she would always be a part of my life. So, listen to the whispers in the night. You never know who or what might be trying to communicate with you, and sometimes the truth can only be found in the darkness. Thank you for watching these 3 true ghost stories that will surely haunt your dreams tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We're always on the lookout for new creepy stories, so if you have any of your own, please share them with us in the comments below. Remember, the world is full of mysteries and the unknown, and sometimes the truth can be even scarier than fiction. So stay curious, and keep your eyes and ears open to the whispers in the night. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay spooky.